Good evening. We begin a holiday weekend, and by the time it's over, the government may have been shut down. The Statue of Liberty may be closed, so might the Washington Monument. And if the Congress and the President don't get their act together and agree on a budget, it won't just be the national symbols. Parts of the Drug Enforcement Agency, the Internal Revenue Service, hundreds of thousands of workers out of work without pay. We are talking about midnight Eastern Time tonight. ABC's Cokie Roberts has the story of the budget deal that wouldn't stick.
Good morning, Mr. Michael.
Oh, sure. What's good about it?
It was a morning after a night before that left a bad taste.
Have you ever seen a real tough vote faced up to around here?
The post-midnight vote of 179 to 254 defeating the budget summit package came after leaders of both parties begged, pleaded, and cajoled.
This is the time when we have to stand up and be leaders, ladies and gentlemen. This is what the people that have elected us expect us to do. And I think we should assume our responsibilities.
Most of all, we should approve this agreement, because I think the American people have begun to lose faith in our ability to do our business.
Appreciate it if you could vote for it. Help us out in this one.
For the President, for the parties, and for the American people. And we must ask ourselves this question: if not now, when? If not us, who?
Someone else was the resounding response of the majority of members. Though they stood and cheered their leaders, House members followed their constituents, who sent the strong message, vote against this package. It was the increases in Medicare premiums that most incensed the voters. Next on the objectionable list were a variety of excise taxes. Today, emissaries from the White House met with congressional leaders, urging them to patch together another budget plan quickly to try to bring over the members who bolted last night. The White House made it clear the president would not agree to any attempt to keep the government going past the midnight deadline unless there is some movement on a new budget. Democrats worry that last night's vote plays into their image as an ineffective party. But Republican candidates have lost support in the polls this week. Voters seem to blame the president and his party for spending cuts and taxes they don't like. And now, by voting against a package the president backed, Republicans have called his leadership into question. Cokie Roberts, ABC News, Capitol Hill.
So what is the president going to do now? Standing by at the White House, our correspondent, Britt Hume. Britt?
Well, Peter, he's got a few days here while this holiday weekend unfolds, in which the technical closing down of the government won't be much noticed. On Tuesday morning, however, all that will change, and he's hoping that by then Congress will have sent him a budget deal that he can agree to. In the meantime, it is insisted here there will be no continuing resolutions, no stopgap measures. He will sign nothing like that. He will let the crisis continue in the hopes that a new deal comes out of it.
Cokie mentioned his political credibility in purely partisan political terms. He doesn't seem to have done too well by this.
Well, he certainly doesn't, Peter. You'll recall he gave up his pledge of no new taxes, which is, for him and his party, that was a major differentiating issue between the two parties. He then gave up along the way, a week or so ago, his goal of getting a capital gains tax cut. In return for that, he got a very ugly deal politically, in the sense that it had no popularity, no popular appeal, and now it has gone down, taking with it perhaps the prospect of reducing the deficit, which could have brought some long-term political gain.
Okay, Britt, thanks very much. Britt Hume at the White House. Mind you, the president doesn't have to face the electorate for another couple of years. The others, many of the others, about 4 weeks from now. In a moment, more on the budget deadlock, preparing for the worst.
Did you?
Down at midnight, it will not be the first time. President Reagan sent government workers home 3 times during the 1980s, but each time Congress backed down, passed a new budget, and everything went back to normal pretty quickly. If that doesn't happen this time, the effect will be very widespread. Here's ABC's John Martin.
This morning, across from the White House, the big agencies of government were facing the moment of truth. At the Veterans Administration, the senior budget and personnel officers assembled to talk about the fate of 240,000 employees.
So we've got to face the option of the possibility of shutdown starting tonight.
They passed around an OMB directive. With no money appropriated, all agencies must furlough non-essential employees. The word would have to go out. About 210,000 nurses, doctors, medical records keepers, and technicians would be essential. About 30,000 accountants, secretaries, and benefits claims clerks would be sent home. At the big Health and Human Services Administration, about 40,000 workers would stay on the job, doctors, nurses, healthcare administrators. But 80,000 non-medical workers would be declared non-essential. At the Social Security Administration, only 3,000 workers out of 63,000 nationwide would be kept at work, 1 or 2 per field office to keep records. At the Commerce Department, about 23,000 workers would be sent home, but 4,700 weather forecasters and technicians would be kept on. At the FAA, 20,000 air controllers and technicians would be kept at work. 30,000 office personnel would not. The post office would keep delivering the mail. It is self-supporting. At the Agriculture Department, 80,000 employees would be sent home. About 30,000 food inspectors, forest firefighters, and quarantine and health personnel would be kept at work. Tourists can still drive through the national parks, but there will be no services. The White House said it would close its dining room and admit no visitors, but there was no immediate word of how many workers would be sent home. There was immediate word of how workers feel.
I think rather than furlough federal employees, we should furlough the politicians.
It was the fear of furlough at the polls which kept the politicians from passing the budget. Now, 2 million federal workers and those who depend on them face an uncertain future. John Martin, ABC News, Washington.
Well, the earliest opportunity to furlough the politicians is the midterm election in a month. And one of the reasons politicians torpedoed the budget agreement was fear of how a vote in favor of raising taxes and cutting Medicare payments might be used against them on television. As we all know, political commercials can be vicious and sometimes misleading, which leads us to truth in political advertising. ABC's Jeff Greenfield has been watching the tube.
As mayor, she was cited for dumping 1 billion gallons of sewage in the bay.
This commercial may become part of political history, because when it ran back last March, it led to this: a detailed point-by-point critique in California's largest paper, the first so-called truth box. The print press has been covering media campaigns now for the better part of 2 decades, but this year, papers like the Los Angeles Times have added a new wrinkle, subjecting the TV claims of the candidates to concentrated, systematic scrutiny. The idea that newspapers might start casting a critical eye on the ever-popular negative TV ads hit the political community like an earthquake.
On the Richter scale, it was at least a 5 or 6. I mean, I think people were really startled that, wait a minute, there's a new player in the game and there's a referee.
The idea was the brainchild of Keith Love, then a Los Angeles Times reporter.
So the chance for the print press to put some kind of box in the paper, to hold the political consultants accountable for what they're saying in the ads, I think is very healthy for the process.
In California, 4 major papers now run these truth boxes regularly. So do the Miami Herald, the Dallas Morning News, and the Washington Post, among others. And what are they finding?
There are few lies. The problem comes, it's just not the whole story. They don't tell you the next fact that you need to know.
So when Texas GOP gubernatorial hopeful Clayton Williams implied that opponent Ann Richards did favors for a bank that had loaned her campaign funds, the Austin American-Statesman checked it out and said the loan was perfectly above board.
He's been repeatedly cited for polluting our environment.
And when Ann Richards charged that Williams was a polluter, the paper said Williams was praised, not attacked by a government agency. That kind of scrutiny, consultants say, is a burden, but a welcome one.
The truth boxes, it puts a burden on us to make sure that we can verify everything we're asserting in an ad. This will keep all the players more honest in the process.
Now that newspapers are putting campaign ads under the microscope, a fascinating question arises.
Young couple stabbing the man and repeatedly raping his girlfriend.
What would happen to the tone of the next presidential campaign if paid TV ads were subjected to regular, ongoing examination on the medium where they play, on television? Jeff Greenfield, ABC News, Los Angeles.
Other news today as the economy slows down, the unemployment rate creeps up. It went up 0.1% last month to 5.7%. That's the highest it's been in more than 2 years. On Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrials lost about 6 points today to close at 2510. The trading was moderate. For the week, stocks gained more than 58 points. And the price of oil, West Texas crude, sold for nearly $38 a barrel today, more than $16 higher than before Iraq invaded Kuwait. When we come back, today's news from the Persian Gulf, and later how one college is fighting back against crime on campus. And our person of the week, marking the end of a magnificent career.